you want to watch a video with me?
Who could suck the blood of its victim through a proboscis-like tongue. Sometimes it is said that the Aswang uses its proboscis-like tongue to suck the fetuses out of their mother's womb. After the conclusion of World War II, there was a huge spike of purported Aswang attacks. There were even bodies piled on the streets as the proof. But why the sudden spike? Why were these demonic creatures going rampant? Were the Filipino people being punished? And what did the American CIA have to do with it? Let's try and find out. This story starts at the conclusion of World War II and involves the Filipino insurgent group known as the Hukbalahap, or the Huks, led by their guerrilla leader named Louis Taruk. Taruk was born a peasant on June 21st in 1913. He would be imprisoned 3 times before the war in his struggle for the militant workers and the peasant unions. And he was a well-known hero to the Filipino people at the time and was instrumental in helping the Philippines gain its independence after World War II ended. The Huks were originally created at that time to fight the Japanese invaders and often fought side by side with U.S. forces until its liberation from the Japanese at the end of the war. At the height of its popularity, the Huks reached a fighting strength estimated at 30,000 guerrillas. Upon the conclusion of World War II, the Philippines was completely devastated, needing almost all of its infrastructure rebuilt, including its railways, waterworks, roads, bridges, and power plants. However, the Philippines had a vast amount of natural resources, like timber, oil, and minerals. But it lacked the capital and heavy industrial ability to get at them. Philippine law also forbade foreigners from owning any business operating in the islands, which all but cut off any hope of foreign investment. As a result, the Bell Trade Act was passed by Congress in 1946. It gave the Philippines $800 million in aid and a tariff-free trade between the U.S. and the Philippines for 12 years. But it required that the Philippine law allow United States citizens to own companies on the islands as a way to attract foreign investments into their economy. To the Huks, this looked as if the Philippines were once again surrendering their sovereignty to a foreign power as they did with Spain. They pictured U.S. citizens owning vast swaths of their economy, and they didn't like that at all. President Rojas wanted U.S. aid, so he kicked the Huks out of Congress. In turn, the World War II veteran Huks rebelled both against the Philippine government and the U.S. forces. When Rojas died in 1948 from a heart attack, he was replaced by Elpidio Corino, whose administration was ineffective in fighting the Huks. And this is where our story gets interesting. The absence of a strong figure in Filipino national politics saw the CIA enter the scene to counter what was emerging as a communist revolution led by Louis Taruk and the Democratic Alliance Party. The CIA knew that sometimes a search and destroy approach was not the best course of action in defeating your enemies. Psychological warfare was sometimes even more effective. And that's when the CIA brought in U.S. Air Force Colonel Edward Lansdale, who used his knowledge of Filipino culture and folklore to defeat the Filipino communist insurgents. I mean, what's worse, fighting off foreign troops in your country or having to fight off blood-sucking demons? And this is exactly the brilliant and gruesome play Lansdale made. Lansdale was a pioneer in clandestine operations and psychological warfare. He served with the Office of Strategic Services in World War II, and he extended his tour to remain in the Philippines after the war, helping the Philippine Army rebuild its intelligence services and resolve the cases of the large numbers of prisoners of war. Lansdale became friends with Ramon Magsaysay, then the Secretary of National Defense, and with his help, Magsaysay eventually became the President of the Philippines on December 30th, 1953. But going back to our story, from 1948 to 1954, he used Filipino folklore to stop the Huks, silently working in the background using the Aswang to stop the incoming communist tide. The CIA began abducting Huk members, killing them, and then they would pierce their necks and hang them upside down until their bodies were drained of all blood. Then the CIA placed the mangled bodies, with the holes in their necks, on the side of the road, usually in busy province areas. The superstitious Huk members were scared stiff, believing that it was the evil Aswang who had done in their comrades. Lansdale's plan worked like a charm. The residents of Luzon lived in fear of being the Aswan's next victim. The communists would often move from one location to another, trying to avoid these nightmarish creatures, but the bodies kept piling. The CIA knew the psychological operation was working, and eventually the Huks would surrender in 1954 and would receive a pardon from the Philippine government. Magically, after their surrender, the Aswang attacks immediately stopped. Dirty, but apparently effective. Let me know your thoughts on these CIA tactics.